Hey, Lee with LG Speed and Custom. In this video, we're installing power brakes on Andrew's 56 Chevy pickup. So I guess this is part 3 of Andrew's build. Part 1, we put the Ford 8.8 disc brake rear end in with a big C-notch and lowered the rear suspension a whole bunch. Part 2, we put in this Heights independent front suspension with power steering, coilovers, and disc brakes. And now in part 3, we are going to put in this guy. This is a dual reservoir, like Corvette style master cylinder and a power brake booster. So if we go underneath the truck here, I've already kind of mocked up the pedal assembly bracket here. This goes through the opening where the original pedal went through. Thankfully, it clears the headers. I was a little bit concerned about that. And this bracket bolts up using the original master cylinder holes. There's one more hole up at the top that we have to drill still. I've been avoiding that because it's going to be interesting to get a drill in here with the transmission in there. But before that, we've run into another problem, and that is that right here, where this transmission cross member is, this is where the power brake booster and master cylinder is going to go. So these don't work together, even though these are two kits designed for this truck to be a bolt-in, plug-and-play deal. You can't use this kit with this kit. So we're going to modify this transmission cross member. I think it's not going to be a crazy thing to do. Instead of where this kicks up through here and bolts to the frame, I think we're just going to build a tab that comes down off the side of the frame, probably use these same bolt holes, and come down a bit and then over so that the transmission cross member is routed underneath the master cylinder instead. We've got lots of ground clearance. I mean, the transmission pan and this part of the cross member are currently the lowest part of the vehicle. So as long as we stay, above here, we're not going to have any ground issues. I've taken a little measurement. We need 3 inches of clearance from this outside edge. So that should put it, how did I have this mocked up earlier? There we go, like that. So that's where we need to cut to make room for the booster. Everything from that edge and up needs to go. I think we'll do that first. I'll probably put the jack underneath here just to support the weight, and then we'll cut this piece out and then make a new piece. All right, we've got the transmission supported by this jack stand and piece of wood. So I'm going to take these bolts out now and then use the Sawzall, and I think we'll cut it right there. I found this piece of scrap tubing from Terry and Kevin's dragster that I built that looks like, we might be able to splice this down and, I don't know, make it look kind of like it's supposed to be like that. I don't know if this will work or not, but it's currently my current idea. All right, that is not the right size wrench. Let's get this guy. Blast some bolts out of here. Maybe from this side. There we go, that fits better. Sawzall time. Oh man. Battery died. Okay, fresh battery. Let's go. All right, we got that piece out of there. So let's test fit this. We'll mock it up in there And then we can build a new transmission cross member, or not a new one, but modify this one to fit around the booster. All right. So this guy, if we just build a plate down from the frame rail so that this bolts on here, and then might even be able to just come straight into it, I think. If we hold this guy about here, and then measure from our top hole down, our top hole on the frame to our top hole there, it's about 4.25. Actually, let's go 4.5. So we'll make a plate that's the same bolt pattern, and then 4.5 inches down, this will bolt on. Make sense? Let's go cut one of these out. What is that, 3/16 plate? Yeah, we could probably make one out of, I don't know, 1/4 inch. Should be beefy enough. Beefy. All right, I just drew up a new bracket here. So it should look something like that. We'll cut this out and bolt it on. This is, basically this piece here. And then we just moved it down. So those bolt holes are already in the frame. This will just drop down to another set of bolt holes like that. Well, let's bolt this plate on and see how it fits. Shall we? Okay, that's pretty all right. So now we just need a tube stretcher. That's easy. Oh, so I'm just kidding. A tube stretcher is not a real thing. I just made that up. But we just need to make a tube that goes from here over to here somehow. Well, my plan of using that piece of leftover tubing with the bend already in it did not work. It would not slide into here. So I just took a piece of 1 3/4 inch tubing, and I just kind of cut the end and manipulated it a little bit with the torch to get it to contour to this. It's not 100% perfect because, this is a bend and this is just a slash cut. So this is a little bit fatter on the ends, but that's okay because that'll just, we can fill that with weld and it'll be all right. It'll ensure good, even penetration on there. So we'll weld her over and weld it up. We've got good clearance through here, so we should still be able to get this booster. If it ever needs to be serviced for whatever reason, it can still slide through there. This worked out really nice. Once we get this welded up, we can drill the hole through here again, and it just had just a 3/8 bolt that went through. So that'll be easy peasy. I gave everything a coat of paint, bolted it back together. We can get our jack stand out of here. Let this down and hopefully it doesn't fall on the floor. Beautiful. All right, now we can go back to putting the brakes together. So here's our power brake kit, sort of. This is everything except for the actual pedal arm, which it does come with, but I've already fished it through the firewall and it was a giant pain in the ass to get it in there, so I'm not taking it out to show you guys. It's in there for good now. But here's our bracket. This is the main pedal assembly. Now the cool part about this is these bolt holes that are here, 2 of them are the factory master cylinder bolt holes. It comes with this little cardboard template that, as you can see, fits this perfectly. And what you do is you take this cardboard template, bolt it to your frame using the 2 existing holes that are already here, and then that shows you where to put the 3rd hole, the new hole. Now, hindsight, we should have done this before we put the engine and transmission in, because this sits on the frame like this. The transmission is here, and now we have to get a drill in there and drill a 7/16 hole through there. I was just under there, and I'm pretty sure that it will fit if you hold your tongue right, but if you don't have your engine and transmission in already, do this first. Drill your hole first. So when this is bolted in, it's got a little shaft right here that the pedal slides on. It's got a little gusset assembly here and a bolt with a grease nipple in the end so that you can grease your little bushing where your pedal pivots on. On this end here, it's got a round hole with 4 holes, and that is where your booster goes on. So the booster has a little threaded rod here, which this threads into, and this is fully adjustable so that you can fine-tune your length. This end here goes in the pedal that is already in the truck, like I was saying, and that's what connects the whole assembly. This end here, it comes with this rubber plug. Get rid of that, you don't need that. That's just so this doesn't get damaged during shipping. This is the end the master cylinder bolts onto. So the master cylinder, this is like a GM Corvette style master cylinder. It's a dual reservoir. I believe both reservoirs are the same so that you can use these. Like this truck has 4-wheel disc brakes like a Corvette would have, so it works for that. But I've also used these with like 4-wheel drum brakes. I've even used them with disc and drum combos, and they work fine. So we've got ports on each side, which is nice because then in different applications you can route your brake lines out of either side, whichever works better. And then it also comes with 2 plugs so that you can plug off the 2 ports that you don't use. Or what I like to do is plug one of them, and then the other port I thread a brake light switch into. So I use one for, this would be for the front brakes, rear brakes, and then this one over here would have a stoplight switch. So you can get these kits with or without a power booster. If you don't use the power booster, this just goes on as is. If you do use the power booster, there's this little plug in here, and that slides down in there and takes up the space so that when you bolt them together, you see that tiny little nipple in there? That has to push on this. So that goes together just like that. Comes with all the hardware. And then this whole setup bolts to this bracket that's bolted to your frame. It also comes with a pedal pad, which is an early Ford one, which I like because I'm an early Ford guy. So now that you guys know what's going on, let's take this template under the truck and we will mark our 3rd hole and drill it. So here's the original master cylinder bracket underneath, and here are those 2 holes that I was talking about that the new bracket already has. So our template simply slides up in place there, and then now we know where to drill our 3rd hole. which is going to be fun because the transmission is right here and we have to fit a drill in there, but we'll make it happen. So I used a couple bolts to hold the template in place, and then I've just got a little 1/8" drill bit on here, because with the 1/8" drill bit we've got lots of wiggle room. Look at that. There's our holes. Step bit, that was the magic of that one, because it's nice and short. I'm so stoked on that step bit. I bought this 3-pack of step bits at Princess Auto a while ago. They were on sale for $9. And I was like, man, I don't know how much I can trust $9 step bits, but it just sawed right through that thing, no problem at all. So now we can put our bracket on. Before I slide it up in there, I'm going to slide the pedal onto the shaft. And now we can get that in there and put our 3 bolts in, hopefully. Oh, there we go. Okay, there's one. It's a little tricky to get to the back side. Make sure we don't have any wires pinched behind there. I think we're okay. This third one, I can't see. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's bolted in. Now we can put our booster on. Well, we've just discovered another problem with this pedal assembly. This is the brake pedal arm, and it does not line up with the hole. It needs to go over that way about a 1/4 inch or so. So what I might try to do, there's 2 options. You can either like make this hole bigger, or I might try to bend the pedal over a little bit. All right, our pedal is fitting properly now. It's not squeaking or rubbing on the floor at all. And I got the bolt with the grease nipple in here. I'll probably, when I put it together for the final time, put some Loctite on there. This little gusset goes up to the booster bracket here. So I think we can put our booster on now. I'll show you what I did to make the pedal fit. I did not take the pedal back out and bend it like I was planning on because it was too hard to get out. So I just enlarged this hole a little bit, and it's got plenty of travel now. Works great. So once the whole thing's together, you'll never ever notice that hole's been oblonged a little bit. And on the inside, it has, a rubber floor mat that already has a pretty chunk looking hole through there. So it'll be fine. So now that the pedal assembly is all happy, we can start putting this stuff together. Before I bolt the master cylinder to the booster for good, I want to measure some stuff just from experience, because I've had this issue before and it sucks. So this little nub right here, let me bring this over so you can see it. This little nub, that is when you push on here, there's the vacuum from the engine comes in here, and there's like a little magic wizard in here that takes the vacuum pressure and makes this way easier to push on. There's like a diaphragm or something. I don't know. I've never actually taken a booster apart to see how they work, but that's not the point. The point is this little nub right here pushes into the master cylinder. So it pushes on this little spacer that we put in. What happens is sometimes when you put these together, that little nub pokes out a little bit too far and is always putting a little bit of pressure on here. Now what happens is as you're driving down the road and you step on your brakes, this pushes in here, pushes the piston, makes your brakes work. When you take your foot off the brake, and this is supposed to release, if that nub is poking out a little bit too far, the master cylinder doesn't release all the way. So there's a little bit of brake pressure still on there. You step on your brakes again, there's a little bit more pressure, and so on and so on. By the time you get about, I don't know, 7 or 8 blocks from home, your brakes are holding pressure now. Your brake lights will stay on, and you'll notice, usually it's on the front brakes, the front rotors are starting to hang up. There's a little bit of resistance. So then you're like, uh-oh, there's a problem. Time to go back home and fix this. And by the time you get back home, your front brakes are smoking. So before we put this together, I want to measure to make sure that that is not going to happen. Now, I've already done this before I filmed, just to make sure that, you know, everything was working okay. What I did was laid this across here, because this is where our master cylinder is going to bolt up, right? So from there, I was able to use my calipers and measure down, which gives us 1.275 inches. So keep in mind, this is an inch thick, so it's actually 0.275 inches. So we know that that nub is 0.275 below the surface where the master cylinder bolts on. So when we measure here, if we take our measurement and go to where the master cylinder bolts up, we have 1.625, which is 1 5/8. And then if we go from here down, because obviously we can't measure across there because of this little riser in here. So if we measure down from that, we have 1.375 inches. So let's take our 1.625 and subtract our 1.35, and that gives us 1.275, which is exactly how much that is. So I mean, in theory, this is absolutely spot on. I would be more comfortable if it had just a tiny little gap in there, just to like ensure that, you know, if this gets hot or warms up a little bit and it expands, we're not going to have an issue. So I'm going to take this little sleeve out and put it on the belt sander and just take ever so slightly off the back of it, just so that there's a little tiny bit of wiggle room in there, some tolerance. So if I had a lathe, that'd be great. I'd probably just like chuck it up in the lathe and smear a little bit off the back, but I don't have a lathe, so we'll just use the belt sander. Well, that shaved it down from 1.5 to 1.45. So just a tiny little bit came off there. Confident that that should be more than enough. So we can, do I want to bench bleed this first? Or put it, I might put it together first. That way if it does have to come apart again, it's not dripping brake fluid the whole time. So we'll do a quick mock-up to make sure it's going to work under there. I've got the booster in there now, and it fits really nice. So I put it all together for good. I've got our little bracket on here. I've got this bolt in there properly. I took the grease nipple out and put a 45 one on there, because the straight one, it'd be a little bit tight getting a grease gun in there, like a grease fitting. So at the 45, it's a little bit easier. But we got another problem now, and that is that our push rod is way too long. I don't know if it's supposed to, like we've got this brake light switch up here. And maybe that brake light switch is not supposed to be there anymore. If it was gone, the pedal would go a little bit further up. But I mean, as it is already inside, one thing Andrew wanted us to, or mentioned, is that this brake pedal comes up really, really high. Like the distance from when you go to take your foot off the gas and step on the brake, you got to move your foot a lot. So he wanted to kind of shorten this up a bit. And if we take that brake light switch out, that's not going to make this any shorter. It's going to make it even longer. So I think what I'll do now is take that push rod apart and shorten it a little bit. I think it's just a threaded rod with or threaded piece of tubing with a heim joint in the end. So I don't know, we can take a measurement and then chop that measurement or that distance out of here, because I'd like to make this a little bit adjustable too. I cut this much, that's like what, 1.5 inches or so out of the push rod, and it fits in there now and has, you know, lots of thread for adjustment. One thing I noticed when I was kind of just mocking this up in here is this rod, when it comes out of the booster, it kind of wants to sit there. That's about 1/2 inch. And remember our pedal arm, it was about 1/2 inch off. So it's almost like when they built this, that this pedal arm should have been welded 1/2 inch further over on this sleeve right here. So that's a little bit annoying. But there's 2 ways we can fix that. We can either put a spacer in there, or because it's on a heim joint, I mean, you probably could suck it up, but then our push rod's going in on a bit of an angle. I don't know if that's okay on a booster, but I know it's not okay like on a master cylinder, or especially with like if you use the Wilwood aluminum master cylinders, if it's going in on an angle like that, it'll cause the piston to wear on one side. So I've had some master cylinders have premature failure because of that. So I might just put a little spacer in there and put a longer bolt through here. Well, I found a spacer in my bolt bin that was exactly what we needed. So I just put a longer bolt in there, and now that is perfect. This is in a nice straight line. So we can move on to the master cylinder now. Our pedal assembly's done, our brake booster's done. The next step is the master cylinder. Before we put this in, we gotta bench bleed it. So I've run some lines. I already had these pre-made because I do this all the time. So these lines just go back into the reservoir here. And what you wanna do is take something blunt and put it on the push rod, or the, you know, that little piece that we just shaved down and stuffed in there. You just wanna push on that. And we're just gonna do nice slow strokes in and out all the way until, Jim's giggling over there, until all the bubbles go away. I don't know why Jim thinks this is so funny when I say slow strokes in and out. Maturity's at an all-time high today. Yeah, once you get no more bubbles, then you're good to go. That means there's no air in the master cylinder itself. If you don't do this, you can end up with a spongy pedal. Nobody wants a spongy pedal. I think we're just about good. One more. Yeah. Okay, we got no more air coming out. So we can take these fittings out, put our lid back on, put this back in the truck, and then start making our brake lines. Master cylinder's bolted back in. So our next, whoa. So our next step now is to make brake lines. Now, you'd think that we would need a brake line that goes from the master cylinder all the way to the brake hose, but that's not the case. We just need a little brake hose, or a little brake line first. Just these little guys. So that master cylinder had those big fat brake line fittings on it. If you go to a decent parts store and find a good parts guy, you can get these great big honkin' fat fittings that fit in there that take a 3/16 brake line without an adapter. So thanks to Glenn for getting these. That was great. Now, they're just short little guys. This comes out of the master cylinder. Our frame rail hits the corner, so we turn 90 degrees, and that's where these guys go in. This is a Willwood residual pressure valve. This is a 2-pound one. The blue ones are 2-pound, and they're for disc brakes. They also make a red one, which is a 10-pound, and that's for drum brakes. And what this is a check valve, essentially. Because our master cylinder is below the floor, the calipers are mounted higher. So what happens is, if you don't have one of these, is the calipers being higher than the master cylinder, the brake fluid is going to like backfeed in there. So that's what these prevent. If you have a car like a lot of like 39 to 48 Fords, the master cylinder was under the floor from the factory. They had these built into the master cylinder, so you don't need them unless you're putting a master cylinder that was designed to be on a firewall underneath the floor, like what we're doing right now. For brake line, we are using, this is 3/16 copper nickel tubing. I really like this stuff because it's, one, super easy to bend, and two, it looks really cool. It kind of looks like old copper brake line, except for this is DOT approved. We got our tubing straightener here. You just roll it through. It comes out straight on the other end, like magic. Wow. Get yourself one of those if you don't have one. To flare it, I've got a really fancy hydraulic flaring kit. But you can just flare this stuff with a regular, like the kind that clamp in the vise if you don't have one. So let's go fit these in here. Like I said, that'll come out of the master, go into here. These are directional. There is, this side says MC for master cylinder, and this side says out. So it's got to flow through a certain direction. All right, those are both installed. So if you need to know which goes to the front and which goes for the back, the reservoir that is closest to the piston, like as the piston, when you step on this rod, the piston's gonna go this way. So the one that the piston pushes on first always goes to the front, and the one that it pushes on last goes to the rear. So we've got our line coming out here, and it goes to the rear, and this one goes to the front. We're gonna continue working on this one now, and we're gonna plumb a line from this fitting here all the way to the back and up to this hose here. Our line to the back is all made and installed. Got a little Adele clamp or P-clip holding it to the frame, and then it goes into here. So now our rear brake system is plumbed. We can plumb our front system now. So originally I was talking about putting the brake line switch right here, but you need a 3/8 inverted adapter to 1/8" pipe thread, and nobody in town has one. Speedway Motors has one, but it's $10 plus shipping, and I don't want to do that. So our other option is to just plumb the brake line switch in line with like a T-fitting, or what I'm going to try first is, remember when we were messing around with this pedal? We got a brake light switch right here. This brake light switch was not hooked up, but it's kind of hooked up, meaning there's still wires running to it, but the pedal assembly that came out of the truck, it was hooked up to like a different switch here. So I'm going to investigate that and see, like, does that switch still work? If it does, we'll probably just use that switch. And if it doesn't work, then maybe we'll look into plumbing that other switch in, the pressure switch that goes in line. So we'll do a little diagnostics first. I got the multimeter hooked up to our brake light switch here, and push the pedal down. And yeah, the switch seems to be working fine. There we have no contact. The pedal is in the up position, so the switch is not connected. We push the pedal down, the switch opens up, connects the circuit, and our continuity test zeroes out, meaning we have full contact. So that's good, because that means this pressure switch, or this brake light switch, works fine, and we don't have to put the pressure switch in. which I kind of feel bad for Glenn because he went through a lot of work to put that or find that pressure switch and make all the fittings and adapters for us. He actually went home to his personal collection and took fittings out of his brass bin just for this. So, and now we're not even going to use them, but I still really appreciate it, Glenn. This is what Glenn had put together for us. So this is just an 1/8 inch national pipe thread switch. You have power goes in, and then when you step on the brakes and this builds pressure, it completes the circuit and power goes out to your brake lights. This is a 1/8 inch pipe thread adapter, and then these are just adapters to go from 1/8 inch pipe thread to a 3/16 tube nut, like so. There's another way to do this, which is how I'm doing my 32, and that is to use instead of using an 1/8 inch pipe thread tee, this is just like a 3/16 inverted tee, like you would use for your brake lines. And then we have a 3/16 inverted adapter to 1/8 inch pipe thread. And this, I think, is a slightly better way because there's less fitting, so there's less chance of a leak potentially happening. But Glenn was not able to get this adapter anywhere, and the other fitting store in town, they did not have one either. So this was the best that we could come up with. But like I just said, the original brake light switch works fine, so we don't need this. Now that we got the brake light switch sorted out, we can move on to plumbing the front system. I've got some brake hoses here. These are, I believe, for like a late 70s, early 80s Camaro. Those are what they call GM metric calipers, which were used on pretty much every GM car and truck into the like late 70s, early 80s. Like S10s had them, G-bodies had them, Camaros had them. So this is, I think, one of the longer options for a brake hose. This end goes on the caliper with a banjo bolt. There's a copper washer goes on each side of the banjo bolt, and then this end will get mounted to the frame. So I just cut out some little brake line tabs on the plasma table there. So I got tabs here that I can line those tabs up and fold this over, or on the rear one I didn't even need to fold it over, so I just sanded those tabs off and gave it a little run through the belt sander to clean it up. So I think before we plumb our lines out of the master cylinder, we're going to find a home for this end. That way we know where we're going to plumb our lines to. So I figured out where to mount this Camaro brake line. Originally I wanted to mount it right here, but our hose was, let me get in a spot where you can see a little better here. So I was originally going to mount it right here, but the hose was a little bit too short for that. And also when we turn the wheel all the way to the left, it would put the hose in between the coils, and we definitely don't want it in there. So where I've ended up mounting it is right up here. I took those little aluminum tabs that I made and I folded it 90 degrees and just put a screw through into the hat there. We got our little clip on here, so our brake hose is nice and secure. Before I permanently mounted it here, Jim went and turned the wheels all the way to the left and all the way to the right, and we had the suspension under load. That way we could ensure that this brake line was not going to get pinched anywhere in here. So now that we've got a mounting spot for this, we can duplicate that on the other side, and we can run our brake line. So we'll probably go from our little pressure valve, or our residual pressure valve we put in way back in here, and we'll probably run that along the frame rail somewhere about here, and then we'll split it off with a T-fitting. From our T-fitting, we'll have one line go up to here, and then the other line will follow this cross member across to the other side and go to the other brake hose. All right, our brake lines are done. So that guy comes out of our pressure valve, our residual pressure valve, and runs along the frame rail here. It kicks out and goes around the leaf spring there, the old leaf spring perch, because we went from on top of the frame. We had to go underneath the frame for this last little bit. Into a T-fitting there. One side goes up to there, and then the other side runs along the cross member. The creeper's stuck. There we go. Ran over my rag. Across the cross member here, and then up to the other side. So now we can bleed the system if we want. I just hooked up the brake booster hose. So I went and got you can get like universal brake booster hoses. So I went and got one. The longest you can get is 3 feet, and this needed to be about 3 feet and a couple inches. So I just chopped her in half with old Marty's Mighty Snips. Man, those things are great. And put in a little piece of 3/8 tubing here. I flared the ends and put a couple hose clamps on there. And that end goes up to, on the back of the carburetor here, there's a port for the brake booster. So the brake booster's done. Now all that is left is to bleed the system. I know I've said twice now that we're going to bleed the brakes, but we're not going to bleed the brakes yet, because I forgot a very important thing. We got to cut a hole in the floor so that we can fill the master cylinder. There's enough room underneath the truck that you could probably, if you got really desperate, you could get under there with like a mirror and maybe like a little transfer pump or something and fill it, but that sucks to do, and I don't like things that suck. So we're gonna make it so that Andrew, if he had to, say he's on a road trip somewhere and he's having brake issues, he can access his master cylinder without having to jack the truck up. We are going to cut a hole in the floor right above the master cylinder and then make a little access panel. It's a little bit weird to get to right now because the master cylinder is kind of under the seat. It's lined up with, you probably can't see, but there's some spot welds right here. And that's where the master cylinder is lined up with. So it's sitting about there. But one of the reasons why we pulled the gas tank out and are putting a fuel cell in here is because Andrew wants to move the seat a little further back. So that will make it easier to get to. It's still not going to be like super easy, but it's going to be considerably easier than having to jack the truck up to get underneath to get to the master cylinder. The other thing that I just did is, Andrew wanted to shorten that pedal up. Well, we needed to know how much we can shorten it and still have full stroke. So because there's no pedal pressure right now, I was able to push the pedal all the way to the floor, and I made a white line there where our piston bottoms out in the master cylinder. So we can shorten that pedal like probably a good 2 inches or so, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 2 inches when it comes to moving your foot from like where the gas pedal's over here to move it up on there, that 2 inches is going to make a huge difference. So to figure out where I'm going to cut this hole, I got the drill with one of my pal Rick's really long drill bits, and we're going to just kind of drill 4 pilot holes around. Like we'll go one there, one there, one there, and one there, and that way we kind of have a bit of a perimeter of where we want to cut the hole in the floor. I just drilled our 4 little pilot holes there. We had one come there, one come there, one there, and one there, which means our lid is right here, which is rather inconvenient with this brace being right there. So I'm wondering if we just did like an access panel there. I wonder if that'd be enough to get to, and then we're not cutting this brace apart. So I mean, if the seat's sitting here, like you're not going to be able to get back here anyways. So if we had a access panel there and then maybe just used a funnel to get to the rear reservoir, I think is about the best it's going to get. We're gonna start with this, and I mean, if that doesn't work, we can always go bigger, but I think that'll work. Well, it's a little bit awkward to get to, but I think it's about as good as we're gonna get without redesigning this whole floor brace. And with a funnel like this, we can get to it pretty easy. We need a little more fluid in there. I might as well top it up while we're in here. And then we'll build a cover for the hole that we just put in there. Okay, rear reservoir is full. This isn't so bad at all. And yeah, I realize that when the seat is in here, it's going to be right where my arm is, but we're just going to pretend that it's fine. A little more. Okay, both reservoirs are full. And no, that is not really, really old brake fluid. I buy brake fluid in the big bottles, and then just keep filling that one up because it's easier to manage than trying to pour it out of a 1-gallon jug. Okay, rear clip is on. That's the hard one. Front clip. Maybe the front clip's the hard one. Come on. There we go. Man, that's a tight spring. All right, let's build a little cover for this now. Probably going to make it just a little bit wider, a little bit further out, and it'll slip in underneath. Slip in, fold down, one screw. Here's what I've drawn up. So this little dotted rectangle, that's the hole that we cut. These little guys here will slide underneath the floor. There's a little notch here because there was like a weird body line there. These corners overlap by 3/8 of an inch radius to make it look nice. And then our hole is purposely offset because there's another body line right there. So we offset the hole so that our screw does not go through that weird body line. So let's cut it out and see what happens. I was having technical issues and it would not cut the center hole, but that's fine. We can just put a self-tapping screw through there. But that fits really nice. I like that. So we'll just put a screw right there, paint it black, and put it back. Huzzah! It's finally brake bleeding time. Reservoir's full. Jim's got his milk crate. He's ready for some pumping. I got a little catch bottle down here that we're going to put on the back of the bleeder. So when you bleed brakes, you always start with the wheel furthest away from the master cylinder, which is usually the right rear. If you're in England or Australia or something, it's probably different, but we're not. So right rear, then rear left, then front right, and then front left. Brakes are bled. Pedal feels good. Want a drink? Anybody want some water? All right, we're done. Sort of. We still got to trim this down. Do that after lunch. It's lunchtime. What's for lunch, Jim?
Tacos.
So this pedal is, oh no, hey, get over here. We just have this piece here, and it's been welded to here. So I'm thinking we can probably just chop that off there, and then chop that off there, and weld that back on there. And our pedal should be down here then. Cool, let's do that. This is clamped in place, ready to weld. I V'd this out really good on both sides because this is pretty thick. I think it's like, 3/8 of an inch thick. So that way we can weld it really nice and get good penetration. Because I mean, that's your brakes after all. That's what you're stepping on. You don't want that to fall off. That'd really suck. And as we learned earlier, I don't like things that suck. Blew a little black paint on there. And there we go. Shorter pedal. Well, there we have it. Video 1, we showed you how to put the Ford 8.8 rear end in and do a big C-notch. Video 2, we put the independent front suspension in with disc brakes and power rack and pinion steering, some cool coilovers. And now we just showed you how to put a underfloor power brake assembly in. So we're gonna call that video here. Probably gonna do one more video on this truck because we still gotta do the fuel cell. We gotta put, button up a bunch of stuff. We gotta fit the front sheet metal still. Andrew wants to move that seat back and a couple other little things that he wants to do, but we're getting close to the end of this build. So if you want to support the channel, as always, please check out lgspeedcustom.com and get yourself some LG Speed and Custom merch. Just got an email today that we're all back in stock on the Roadster shirts, and we got a new shirt design that just came out too. Although this video, by the time you see this, it'll probably be a couple weeks down the road, so it might not be that fresh, but it's fresh right now because I just got the email right now. So yeah, check out the website for that. Thanks to The Get Down from Edmonton, Alberta for the music on this video. My good friend Ted Wright, Ted the Rock and Roll Mechanic from Edmonton. So I don't know what else to say. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys on the next video. Let me know what you think of this. This is a little bit different from what we normally do. Normally we mostly work on like traditional style stuff. This is a little more high-end and modern, but that being said, as much as I like traditional stuff, I do really enjoy doing this kind of, really like doing chassis work like this. So let me know what you guys think about it, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.